Hey guys, today we're gonna review all things this movie. Let me share my screen. Sorry, one quick second. Yeah. Okay, guys. So today we're gonna review Sorry to Bother You. I think this is a good movie, so let's check it out.
But I do want to talk about it because for me, it was
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty much a hit or miss. Check out this guy, Cultural, his review
a
here.
hit, and I just want to talk about some of the themes presented throughout and some of the things I noticed as well. Now, there is a video where I talk about the whole movie as a whole, everything that happens, and its ending, so more of an explanation video. If that's what you're looking for, you can definitely go check that out on my channel. This is more, we're going to be talking more in depth about certain things that happen throughout the movie, what its meaning is, and just my opinion, honestly. And if you're not into that type of video, then I suggest go check out that other video. But anyways, as always, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and do that right now. Let's get into this movie. So one of the first things I want to point out is Cassius' name is Cassius, and when you say his full name, it's Cassius Green, and Cash, Cold Hard Cash is green. And I think this goes into simplifying and trying to explain how corporations see us, and that is just a way for them to get more cash. And I think that is a really direct jab as to like what worry free or the telemarketing power callers, all of that see everybody as, and that's just a means for them to get more cash. Now I think also what's really interesting is the white boys thing, because I think that for minorities or anybody really to really get into climbing up the ladder of sorts in anything, and it's not just necessarily minorities, it's just people I'm saying who are in a social class below and who are trying to make it into whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. So basically, this movie touches on like how to integrate into the workspace from like a minority perspective. So you see like Cassius kind of code switching. Um, Also his colleagues as well, code switching. He forged his resume to get a job, but the employer didn't care. So I think that the movie did turn weird to some aspects. It was comical, but this actor is kind of known for his comical take on serious issues.
They're trying to make it in, they have to put on this facade, this sort of like disguise in order for them to be taken seriously. And I think we see this throughout with the telemarketing and trying to become a power caller and whatnot, and Cash's respect, because up until the point when he wasn't using the white voice, he wasn't going anywhere, and as soon as he started being this other person that he didn't know who he was, that's when he really started making it to the big time level. So I think that's a really interesting thing right there. Another interesting aspect I think is the absurd TV shows that we see, and definitely one that I really want to talk about is the I just got the shit kicked out of me, because I think that really is showing how we are so obsessed with watching these shows that are really pretty much like don't give you anything like intellectually to grow your brain on, and it's just like pure like garbage, I guess you could say. And I think that goes hand in hand with things like we see today's world with World Star videos, even Jerry Springer and more. All of this, it's just like it's sort of things that are just there to keep you entertained, but don't really offer any growth for your mind. And I think that was a really interesting way of showing that with the TV shows. And that brings me back to the other thing in this movie that I thought was really interesting, and that is when we're seeing the protests happening, and we see that Cassius is like still going to go to work and whatnot. Somebody throws a soda can at him, and this instantly goes viral. It becomes a meme, and we see actually the person who threw the soda at him, who was one of the protesters, she actually goes on to become a sort of spokesperson and has a commercial with the Coca-Cola company or whatever company it was. And I think that that was really interesting in a way, showing that this movie showed a lot about selling out and whatnot. And we see this protester who was so against corporation greed and whatnot, now she is part of the machine that she was so much protesting, and it shows that either side can be bought out, and there is just like a lot of flaws in it all. And also I think Another thing that pointed out was that you had this huge protest and whatnot going on for like doing good and whatnot and getting people paid, but the thing that people are actually focusing on is not the protest itself now. They're just focusing on those funny 15 seconds that we saw. So I thought that was a really interesting part about the movie, was how our attention is diverted elsewhere because maybe the protest and whatnot wasn't that as appealing to cover or go over as opposed to somebody getting hit in the head with a soda can. I also think the rapping scene illustrates more than one thing, and I think the biggest thing about it all is how Cassius was invited to this party and he thought he was part of this elite group now, but he is actually more there being their entertainment of sorts. And it's like, you can come, but you're never going to be at our level. Like, you'll be here with us,
Yeah, I
but you're
agree.
still going to be seen
I
as
agree
less.
with I agree with that. Let me just speed it up a bit more. I don't know if he's given that in-depth analysis as I was looking for, but yeah, it's basically just a movie on social commentary on the workplace.
That. And I think that can be seen in many different ways. And I think it's either it can be seen in a social class way, a racial way, and whatnot. Which I found very interesting with this movie is it never gave you that clear on the nose definition of what it's trying to do. And in fact, it was like can be interpreted in many ways. And I think also it can go with the music industry as well. You have somebody who could be rapping all of these very lyrical, social conscious bars, and not to say that the person who's just doing like ignorant or party type music is like a bad person, but it's just the way that the system like is it's just the way that the majority of the population gears towards more of that and really don't care about what people have to say who are really trying to say something in music. And I'm not sure if that's what Boots Riley's trying to say because he was a musician and whatnot, and maybe he saw this in when he was in that field, or I think he's still in that field, and I think maybe that's just the way he views things. But that's what I got from that scene, is that they really didn't care what he was saying and turning people into horses as Stephen Liff wants to do. And
Yeah,
they
the
still said
harsh
exactly
thing was kind of
entertainment
weird in
and
this
were
movie.
pretty much carefree about whatever goes on. So I thought that was a really interesting scene right there. Now the biggest thing that people are talking about this movie definitely has to do with the horses and turning people into horses as Stephen Liff wants to do. And I think that goes with the whole phrase, they're working you like a horse. And we see that horses are seen throughout the movie as well, as we see them throughout Liv's home. We see he's on the book cover riding a horse. The plate with the powder that Cassius thought was Coke had some horses on there. And we also see it with Mr. Blank also eating apples, as they say horses do. So I thought that was really interesting that things were laid out for us in front of us, and they were giving us sort of clues as to what Stephen Lift was wanting to do and how he got to that point. Now, I also think that it's really interesting earlier on in the film that somebody says, this is telemarketing, we're not remapping the human genome here. And I thought that was really interesting because that's exactly what happens by the end of the film, and really a great way to foreshadow all of this. But overall, I think those were some of the biggest messages in this movie that I caught myself, and I think the biggest one of them all is just how corporation greed starts to see people as less than, and maybe not literally turn them into horses, but work them like horses and not see them as equals to
No,
them.
I
Because
get that metaphor. Yeah, work them as our horses. That's a good point. I think we're kind of done with this one. Let's take a look at the others. I think that kind of covered. Yeah, this one was a good one. Again, the movie was in 2008. Let's look at the cast again. He had a good cast to bother you. Yeah, they had a high power cast. Again, I'm using the Opera browser. Yeah, so they had a high power class. Lakeith, he's a big actor. He was in Clarence, that movie. So I'll show you this movie was in the Book of Clarence. Yeah, that was a good one. She, our Tessa Thomas from Thor, Creed. So she's pretty big. I'm not sure of his work actually. Mm, this guy, I've seen him before, but let's see his work. Oh, he's in Mickey 17. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that one. Oh, Beef. Okay. I know him from Beef. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Oh, he's in Invincible too. I think he's the voice of Invincible. I think. Okay. So let's look at this one. Okay, let's see what we missed in this movie.
Sorry to Bother You is the brainchild of director Boots Riley. You might have heard of Boots. He's in a band named The Coup, the man behind songs like Kill My Landlord and Baby Let's Have a Baby.
Yeah, I like
before Bush
this
did something
movie,
crazy.
this review
Being
so
communist
far.
with no reservations, Boots created one of the most satisfying anti-capitalist films we've seen in over a decade. To summarize it quickly,
Yeah, it's anti-capitalist for sure.
and movie spoilers ahead if you haven't seen it, it's on DVD so you really have no excuse. Cassius Green, threatened with eviction, takes a job at a call center. While union organizers start to organize a strike for fair wages, he begins to separate himself from the pack by being an excellent salesman. When he's offered a position in the upper floor, with much higher pay, he crosses the picket line in pursuit of a better life. But being a top floor salesman isn't all it's cracked up to be. His new job has him literally selling death in the form of drone strikes and military equipment. Even worse, one of the company's biggest partners is Worry Free, whose workforce comprises of domestic slave labor. Their appeal is in the name. You sign on for a life of servitude, but you get free housing, free food, it's worry-free. The already absurd movie takes
I didn't get that. Okay, that's pretty cool. That was the meaning behind worry free. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. I thought it was like a parody on like Zuckerberg and one of those social media guys. Okay, okay. I see.
an even weirder turn when Cassius attends a wild rich people orgy party hosted by the CEO of Worry Free, Steve Lift. Steve likes Cassius and wants him to join in on the company's newest project. But before he can give him his spiel, Cassius accidentally stumbles into horse people. Freaking out, he
Yeah,
gets
this was weird.
commits to stay through the presentation to make sense of the situation. As soon as it's over, CEO Lift delivers the most important line in the film.
So you can make more money? Yeah, basically. I just didn't want you to think I was crazy. That I was doing this for no reason, because this isn't irrational. Oh. Cool. All right. Cool. No, I understand.
But to make sense of it, we have to travel back a few decades. In 19...
Shout out to this contributor. This is a comprehensive review. So Daniel Tours, yeah, follow this guy. This is a pretty comprehensive review.
1989, a British sociologist by the name of Zygmunt Bauman was fed up by the absolute state of sociology. By then, academics in the field of sociology had had a lot of time to analyze the Holocaust, to figure out why it happened and who was responsible. But according to Bauman, they had done a piss-poor job of finding answers. In response, he wrote Modernity and the Holocaust, a dramatic takedown on how we had all collectively failed to understand what the hell happened back in World War II. The Holocaust is a dark stain on our history. How is it possible that in the age of the automobile, skyrocketing quality of life, a progressive era where we had conquered slavery and other societal blights, how is it possible that one nation set out to murder 12 million people? It doesn't make sense. A popular explanation is that this is one example of a larger history of Jewish oppression, a nasty case study on the extremes of racism. Anti-Semitism has existed as far back as Jewish people have, so it's an easy connection to make. It only needed a particularly devilish man.
I know back in the days, companies, you worked for companies for like 40 years, they paid for your pension, so on. I heard stories. I wasn't able to fact check this, but I think companies used to pay for housing before the Ford era, they paid for housing as well as your pension too. So I guess they were drawing parity to that. But I like where he's taking this review.
Man in Hitler to stoke the flames. Another approach is to take a more Hobbesian look at things. There is no shortage of reasons to think people are naturally inclined to do evil things. If one takes this view, it falls on the shoulders of civilization to prevent the excesses of humanity. Hitler's regime was the human will unshackled, a rampaging force for conquest. In this case, it was our collective failure to restrain ourselves that caused the Holocaust. In both cases, the Holocaust is characterized as a mistake. But Bauman disagrees entirely. He argues that the Holocaust was the culmination of everything modern society was. To help us out, Bauman illustrates a metaphor. Modern culture is a garden culture. It defines itself as a design for an ideal life and a perfect arrangement of the human condition. Modern genocide, like modern culture in general, is a gardener's job. It is just one of the many chores that people who treat society as a garden need to undertake. If garden design defines its weeds, there are weeds wherever there is a garden, and weeds are to be exterminated. They must be segregated, contained, prevented from spreading, remove errors on the way towards progress, but as culminations of ideas and processes that encompass a society. The Holocaust was awful because it carried the tradition of the modern age to its logical conclusion. Now, when the CEO said this, the audience at my theater burst out laughing. One person even shouted, "No, it isn't," when he said it was rational. And the response makes sense. We're primed to look at these movie villains as isolated cases of extremism. You know, maybe the CEO of Worry Free saw his parents die when he was a child, or his people were exterminated on some distant planet. But I think Boots Riley chose this as a more than a simple gag line. Like every modern tragedy, the Worry Free Corporation is the climax of everything the world of the movie had been working up to. Corporations with unlimited wealth and power, drastic inequality, racialized poverty, obsessively male and competitive workplaces, and media that serves only one purpose: to pacify the viewer. Genetically modified superhumans that work to balloon shareholder profits is rational, and that's the scary part. So the question is this realistic? Is worry-free in our future? Yeah, no. The return towards slave labor in the United States would be a reversal of everything that's been happening for the past half century. Our economy is more decentralized than ever. Under the auspices of freedom and flexibility, companies are moving away from workers and towards independent contractors. They barely want to pay your 401k. You really think they'll pay for room and board? I'd quicker expect a Patreon-fueled return to serfdom than this. But that's a little bit disingenuous, isn't it? You might have noticed that in the summary of the movie, I was careful to point out that Worry-Free employed domestic slaves. A lot of contemporary discourse is hyper-focused on whether the bad things happen to Americans. Such a small detail in the grand scheme of things, really, is enough to turn our attention off completely from an issue if it doesn't affect us personally. But it shouldn't matter if the people that are enslaved were born on this continent or not. I mean, yeah, I guess for the statesmen and their geopolitics it matters, but for the other 99% of the planet, slaves are slaves. And the Worry-Free Corporation already exists. There's no what if about it. Just to give you an idea on how reliant we are on worry-free style labor, developing nations were responsible for 60% of all manufactured goods in 2012. That's your coffee, your clothes, your everything. There are 45.8 million people enslaved worldwide, and they generate over
Ew, wow. 150 billion.
$150 billion in revenue a year. This is only forced labor, mind you, and if we're following the rules of the movie, then that includes men, women, and children who aren't technically forced into anything but have no realistic alternatives. Under this rubric, we'd have to start looking at nearly every product manufactured abroad. I'm not qualified enough to do the math, but with a global GDP of $75.4 trillion, we're looking at an unimaginably high number of slave-adjacent profits. And I hope you're ready for me to pull the rug from under you again, because Americans are being enslaved. Don't take my word for it, take the constitutions. Prisons have become slave empires, with the US housing around 22% of the world's prison population, despite having only 4.4% of the world's population. Our slaves do everything, from work inside the prison to farm and factory work for for-profit businesses. In response, prisoners have held nationwide strikes on and off for the past 2 decades, demanding reforms that tend to fall on deaf ears. Curiously, the one defense of slave prison labor you always get is they don't deserve a fair wage, their room and board gets paid. Despite prisons being highly lucrative closed systems where prisoners pay more than their fair share in labor, rational responses to slavery is par for the course. We had them in the 1800s, we got them today. Once we start looking at our politics, our media, and so forth, Sorry to Bother You to not touch on the question of race in the movie. Sorry to Bother You has taken our world and cranked everything to 11, but we were already at like a...
Yeah, I like this part of the movie when you call like you were put into the world of the people on the other side of the phone. So I thought that was brilliant cinematography. I thought that was brilliant.
a 6 or a 7. A few details here and there might be off, but this is it. Welcome to Hellworld.
I don't
But
know
I'd
about
be
that
remiss to not touch on the question of race in the movie. It's the one thing most media outlets have brought up, what with the code.
I think race was like a minor aspect of the movie. I think it was more the social issue of the working class versus the upper class.
Switching, and so on. And this is usually accompanied with a few mistakes. The one mistake I constantly see online is bringing up Donald Trump. Not everything has to do with Donald Trump.
Never heard of that.
And 2, questioning whether a Sorry to Bother You situation is in our future. But the movie doesn't pretend to be a dystopian future. It's a dystopian present. The inability of mainstream outlets to really grapple with the question of class warfare, combined with their expertise at dealing with the questions on race, is monumental. It shows how far we've progressed towards racial equality, at least in terms of well-off liberal spheres. But it also shows how lacking our general knowledge is in terms of class and imperial exploitation. Thankfully, just like how the film turns up the awfulness to an absurd degree, it's also incredibly hopeful, with an ending that rivals Get Out in terms of satisfying punch. So sure, things might be bad.
I don't know. It was a good movie. The horse scene was kind of weird. The horses in the movie was kind of weird, but overall, it's a good movie. Looking forward to hearing what you guys think. All right, guys, thanks.